wants to talk about black swans? Put your hand up. Put your hand up. Who wants to talk about black? What is that? It? One hand? Come on, let's have some vibrancy, some energy. Yes. Actually, you can't talk about black swans because they're unexpected events. So why are we doing this panel? Because we've got the experts to tell you what the next imminent black swans are, even though you can't predict black swans. First, we're going to have a chat, 10-minute chat with Mohandas Pai. Then we're going to get the panelists up. So this is a fest of black swan chat, preparing you and your businesses to mitigate those risks. Mohandas, get on stage. Mohandas Pai, chairman of Aarin Capital Partners, to give us his wisdom about black swans, what's coming, what isn't, what should we be worried about, and how should we prepare for it? I suppose there's a certain kiddery going on here, Mohandas, because you can't predict black swans, but that's exactly what I'm going to ask you to do. On your worry list, black swans essentially unpredictable events, high impact. Grey swans, which would include they're known, but they're thought highly unlikely. And of course, white swans, predictable and can be anticipated. So we'll talk about the whole range, black, grey, and white. But let's start with black. What are the black swans which you are most worried about?
Well, we saw the pandemic in the first place, but we need to understand how the world is changing tremendously. We are in the midst of the digital revolution. 15 years ago, we had the internet, and that created a whole new world. Because 250 years ago, when the industrial revolution started with the invention of steam engine, we saw the domination of Europe and the decline of Asia. Now in the digital revolution, and let me give you data to tell you what the impact will be. Out of 8 billion people on the planet, 5.5 billion people have a mobile phone, about 5.3 billion people on the internet. So business models have changed. And the speed of change is enormous, and in the next 7-8 years is going to accelerate. So when you have the digital revolution, you have a world which is interconnected. On top of that, we have AI and quantum computing coming. I was in a fintech forum in Singapore recently, and the discussion among global experts was, what happens when quantum computing and AI come together? And they said it could happen in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And they said that with quantum computing, all the crypto cores on which the global financial system runs could be broken. Then I asked an eminent banker who's handling this for a major global bank, what do you think of the security threat? And he said, I asked my cyber security people, what do you think? And they said extinction. Now that is a real threat.
Yeah, it is.
Because please remember, they also said that hackers have taken the emails of a large number of people and kept it away so they could test it when quantum computing comes. And that to me is enormous. I'll explain a couple of more things, then we understand, because I think it's important to understand the mega trends. We could have a pandemic, and that could be a black swan, right? But that is a once in 100 years, we don't know what's going to happen.
The man who's an expert on black swans, who wrote the books on it, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he said it wasn't, he said COVID wasn't a pandemic because it was predicted that a pandemic would happen, maybe the timing. That's semantics, but it's definitely included on our list of swans, whether it's black or gray. But,
you know, the next thing that's happening is about global aging.
Yeah.
You'll be very surprised that the UN has said that the world population will be 11 billion people by 2100. Now the best estimates are 9.6 billion people. Today we have 8 billion people, and we see populations decline in many parts of the world. China saw a decline of 0.43% in the population last year. Only 9.6 million babies were born. We've seen a decline in Japan, where the population is declining by 800,000 people a year. 35% of Japan is above the age of 60. And you're seeing happening fertility come down in India. India is 2.0. India's population could start declining by 2045. And we're seeing happening in Korea, in Russia. In the United States, we're going to have the Hispanics become the majority community. So when the human race itself sees aging at such a rapid scale, what happens to all these countries? What happens to social system? Something could break.
What happens to the labor markets, to social
systems,
to economic growth? And you've got youth bulges. So you've got bulging youth and aging population.
Yeah, the bulging youth will come in Africa. India's bulging youth is already there right now, will pass away. And the third part, which I would say, is about climate change, which all of you know. Climate change will impact the energy markets. Energy is a $4 trillion market, right? And where are we going to get the energy to sustain ourselves? What is going to be the impact? I think much has been written. And the last thing is about geopolitics. This decade will see the shift of economic power from the OECD to the emerging markets, because we are $112 trillion in GDP. In the next 10 years, the emerging markets are going to go faster. Europe may grow 1.5%, US 2.5%. When there's a geopolitical shift and the rise of a great power like China, we are seeing the impact of that. Will it lead to an actual war? Will it lead to maybe, like somebody say, the use of nuclear weapons by Putin? There could be many things. So this century, I mean, the next 10, 20 years are the years when we're going to see rapid changes happen in the globe due to many reasons. And the rapidity of the change is something that all of us don't know. And those could lead to many...
How do we deal with we, businesses, individuals, entrepreneurs, rapidity of change? I love that, rapidity of change. What's your answer?
I think the answer is very clear. People at the top should understand the forces that are moving this change forward, and they should set up groups who will study them and keep them prepared. Yeah. For example, the digital revolution. Business models are changing very, very rapidly, because the industrial revolution created the global supply chain where you required transportation, pipelines, financial services, retail, wholesale to connect producers to consumers. Now they're all on the web, right? I start a business somewhere in a remote place. I connect to all the people who are on the web immediately. So what happens to traditional businesses? What happens to cost structures? Big businesses could disappear in 2 or 3 years if new models come up. Maybe the market will expand, but those things can happen all of a sudden. What happens to the global financial system if quantum computing come in? So I think we've got to ideate all this. We've got to think about it and put up the kind of moats that are required to protect ourselves. But I honestly feel it's a losing battle.
Yeah, I just had a Black Swan event. I opened this bottle, it exploded all over me, and it was high impact. That was a Black Swan event. I thought it was still water, it was sparkling. There you go. Black Swan events are kicking off everywhere. Just before we get the panel up here, I want to just stick your hands up to all. I'm just going to say each topic that Mohandas said. Stick your hand up if you think that's the biggest potential Black Swan event. We'll just do a little straw poll. Let's start with the digital revolution, the onset of AI. Put your hand up if that's your #1 Black Swan worry. Okay, got a handful of hands there. What about aging? What about aging? Aging populations, demographics, okay, AI winning so far. Climate change. Climate climate disasters, that's interesting. Geopolitics, I mean, that's such a big thing. We already know the world is awash with geopolitical issues. Interesting. So I'd say climate change is the biggest. Surprised by that?
No, I'm not saying climate change is the biggest, because people have got to be around to feel the impact of climate change. Yeah. If populations age and the entire global population comes down by 2100, well, you're not going to be around to feel the climate change. So I think aging and the loss of fertility is the big issue for humanity today. Yeah. Because climate change happens over thousands of years. It's going to happen. The seas may rise maybe 5 meters. So maybe New York, London may be impacted. You have to come to Bangalore. We are 1,000 meters up.
Mohandas, come and sit here. Okay. I'm moving to the end. Then I'm going to introduce all our panelists. And one by one, you sit next to Mohandas and go that way. So firstly, Faizal Kottikollon, founder and chairman of KF Holdings. Faizal, come and sit there. Big round of applause. Vimal Shah, hello, chairman of BIDCO Africa. Bhaskar Ramesh, director, Google India. And Haresh Aswani, managing director, Tolaram Group. At the end, sir. And also we have Ambassador Amina Mohamed, who is founder and president of Trade Negotiations Investment Forum, who joins us virtually. Ambassador, let's start with you, because you're virtual. You're the only lady on the panel. So in the interest of diversity, I should 100% come to you. So thank you so much for joining us today virtually. Ambassador, I hope you had an opportunity to listen to what Mohandas had to say. What do you have to add to that list of worries? I mean, forget calling them black swans. They're a list of worries. What do you have to add to that list? What black swans swans are on your worry list right now?
Well, thank you very, very much, and I am extremely delighted to be part of this panel. I'm not too excited about the fact that I'm the only lady on the panel, because if you talk about black swans, the population that's most affected is actually, women and children, and so I'm sorry that I'm the only one that is on the panel, but for me, I would say the same thing. I would say that today, climate is one of the biggest worries. On the continent, obviously, our biggest worries are around conflict and peace building, but also the youth bulge.
Yeah.
Those are issues that we are dealing with. Obviously, for many of the issues that we're talking about, you can actually, it's about just managing the risk, I guess, preparing better, continuous improvement, assessment of situations, and looking at historical factors to just ensure that we're building the necessary, foundations, but also planning ahead of time, so that we enhance the capabilities of our organizations, institutions, our governments, to deal with these issues, build resilience, continuous monitoring of all the events that are happening, especially geopolitically today. I think that is, it truly was a black swan for me to see some of these wars that erupted because they were so unexpected. And not just one, but several of them. So all those, I think, are issues that we must deal with. Obviously, definitely decrease the impact of those black swans, and make sure that we build on resilience of communities, of societies at the lowest levels, because they're the ones who feel the impact the most.
Yeah, Ambassador, fantastic. I'm going to come back to you in a second to drill down on some of your black swans, climate conflict, the youth bulge. I'll just skip Mohandas for this bit, and then we'll come back to Mohandas. Faizal, we had a lovely chat yesterday on Zoom where it's super inspiring, telling me about COVID and the impact of COVID and what you're doing. But before we get to that, Faizal, I think it's important we learn lessons from prior black swans. And one of the big black swans was the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009, 2007, 8, 9. What are the lessons, Faizal, we should have learned, we have learned, and maybe we haven't learned from prior black swans like the global financial crisis?
Thank you. I've seen two black swans. One is the financial crisis, and the last one is a COVID. And I think financial crisis happened because we are not prepared. I think we all became too relaxed, borrowing money, spending money, living outside our means. And I think that was one of the biggest challenge that happened in 2008. People, when I was doing my MBA in finance, we've been taught by the professors, if you have 1 rupee, you borrow maximum 1 rupee. Ideally will be debt equity ratio is 0.5:1, correct? So today, that is completely changed. Today there is no boundaries, no rules. Somebody is willing to give you 1:20, you take it, and you buy mansions and houses and aircrafts and boats. And I think we have a problem of not governing all these laws, correct? I think human beings have seen multiple issues as we move forward. And I think we need to have a control on lending, on borrowing, and also educate people how to live within means.
Can you see another GFC? Could we see another global financial crisis in our lifetime?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, really.
I mean, the US has got $33 billion. I mean, if people don't buy their bonds, what is the US going to do? Yeah. I mean, you see what is happening today? The US has $33 billion of debt. $30 trillion of debt on $26 trillion of GDP.
Yeah.
They have a deficit of maybe $1.72 trillion a year. Now, if the rest of the world doesn't buy their bonds, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, that's real, right? The West is borrowed up to here.
But we've been talking about the Japanese debt explosion for years.
Yeah, but it's all internal debt.
Happened.
It's all internal debt.
Yeah.
Japan is internal debt,
isn't it?
Yeah, here is about 9 trillion is external debt for the United States.
Would you concur, Vimal? Could we see another global financial crisis in the next 5-10 years?
Absolutely possible. I think the issue around talk about US, then
Yeah.
US would create a war, right? Simplest way of getting out of a recession is to create a war.
We like Vimal. He says it how it is. It's happened before.
It will happen again. It can happen again. I think it's the same thing with petroleum. And I think the whole thing around money and is a big thing, right? Which currency is your base currency? Is it dollar or is it something else? That could create a war. The other one is a religious war, right? I'd say it bluntly. There could be a big religious war in the world.
Yeah.
And that we haven't seen yet.
I don't want to...
It's a black swan, so we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. We've got so much to chat about. Bhaskar, AI, let's just cut to the chase, because you're the guy, you're at Google, you're in the weeds. Keep it simple. Extinction event, it's going to take all our jobs. Bill Gates says, oh, we're going to work 3 days a week. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where are we heading?
Yeah, I think Mohandas already added a lot to it, but absolutely, I think right now I'm with Google for the last 11 years, and this is the most profound technology that human beings are really inventing today. And I think let's take it back to a little bit of lesson in history, right? For the sake of the audience, basically, internet was a technology with the US defense a long time ago, 25 years back, and then a TCP/IP protocol was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, and then the HTTP protocol has happened, and then the World Wide Web emerged, right? And then the browsers like Netscape Navigator, Internet Explorer has actually started, and that just brought what is geeky tech in the hands of people like you and me, right? We can write www and then access the world's information at your fingertips. Now, and then the mobile revolution happened. That's considered the second shift. And in fact, Google was the desktop company, and it has to pivot the entire company towards mobile, and today everything works brilliantly on mobile. And what we call AI is like the third big shift. Why? Because AI has been in the works for the last 7 decades, but today what we are talking is the browser moment, right? Whether it is Bard from Google or ChatGPT or Copilot, all of them are browsers which actually are putting the technology, the massive technology power of AI in the hands of people like you and me. So just to double click a little bit more, think of it like what we are saying is like, and there are two sides to AI. Think of it like a left brain and a right brain. Yeah. So your left brain is like the analytical AI, and it is very good at synthesizing data, prediction. Even if you're using Google Maps today, you are really leveraging analytical AI and ability to kind of predict what's next. But all this buzz, and which is the most important one for us to acknowledge, is the right brain kind of AI, which is the generative AI, which has become really good at creating and conversational, right? And the combination of these two can potentially reimagine businesses and reimagine business models, can impact our work, our life, and everything we see around us.
For the best.
Absolutely. I think so. I think it's the most, it's going to be the opportunity of our lifetime.
Maybe. It depends on where you are.
Yeah, in fact, it is why I'm sharing is because, yes, I think it is the biggest alpha trend which is impacting and shaping and accelerating every other trend and the black swan moments that we just spoke about, including climate change, right? The UN IPCC has actually shared we need to reduce emissions by 43% by 2030. Now, AI, we recently did a report with Boston Consulting that AI can actually reduce 5 to 10% of the emissions, on its own, just by doing a majority of the things. In the interest of time, I can take a pause, but I think, I really think it's the biggest hope to solve many of the problems that we just speak about. But if there is one black swan moment, I think I'm not good at predicting, so that's not, I would have been in a different job. But I think complacency, and I really agree with Mohandas that, Mr. Pai, that leadership, sense of urgency in embracing this is, I think, the biggest thing right now, to embrace AI and how it impacts businesses.
Yeah, really good. Haresh, what's the big black swan that's wandering across this stage where you're sitting?
I have a slightly controversial view, and my black swan comes from the past. It's still a problem now. It will still be a problem in future, and that's leadership around the world.
Which he just said, leadership, sense of urgency.
Yeah, he just said it.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, right, all the conflicts we're having everywhere now is being caused by leaders. Leaders created this, and it's ongoing. Whether we look at the Russia-Ukraine issue, whether we look at the Israel-Hamas issue, the constant threat of nuclear war coming from Korea, the financial situation that we talk about, whether it's China, US playing its game, affecting the whole world, and you talk about climate change. If all the leaders in the world don't come to an agreement, we are where we are. There won't be a change. I live in Africa for the last 35 years. And why hasn't Africa grown? Primarily for me, it's just the leadership up and down the line. So unless leadership decides and say that we are leaders because we are of service to the people and not service to ourselves, we are where we are. So unless leadership changes in this world, these problems will carry on.
Ambassador, who are the leaders in Africa? As we know, the AU has just joined the G20. That was super exciting. That was, one of the big accomplishments of this G20 presidency, of which there were many and of which we will discuss them all in the coming days. Who are the leaders in Africa who are going to combat climate change, resolve conflict, deal with the youth bulge, manage this risk?
Well, because of the impact that climate has had and continues to have on the continent, I think that all the leaders of the continent are, kind of realizing that they must rise to the occasion. If you just take an example of Kenya today, and Vimal is there, my compatriot, and he knows that we have serious floods in the country that have affected everything, absolutely everything, from the movement of goods, the movement of people, to the provision of services. Everything has been affected. Just before we had the floods, we had drought, right? And before that, we had a cold spate that was neither here nor there, right? And so I think the leaders are kind of rising to the occasion, but I agree with the last speaker that most of the problems that we are facing today are problems that are caused by bad leadership, unprepared leadership, and a leadership that does not even listen. And so we need to address the issue of leadership, but on climate, I think that you find that Africa is actually at the forefront. We had an African summit on climate here, and Vimal, I think, was present at that summit, where we agreed on a declaration that would make all of us extremely, extremely proud. I think the only danger that one faces, the only black swan actually for me, is that that declaration will just remain a declaration, because the rest of the world, the rest of the globe, will not rise to the occasion, taking advantage of the unity of the continent on the issue of climate, and the need for the rest of the globe to support the measures that the governments of Africa have identified as being critical to their survival. So leadership is very, very critical. We need to address that. I think it's been the failure of the entire globe, not just the continent, but the entire globe. But on climate, I think we're getting our act together. We've made a lot of progress, and I hope that we'll continue making that progress into the future.
Thank you, Ambassador. Stick your hand up if you think the leadership is bad. This is global, and the leadership is unprepared. Stick your hand up. Let's do a quick straw poll. Really, that you? Okay. Okay. Oh, now we're getting a bit brave. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Two hands.
Who had the stat? It was you, Bhaskar. Before you say your stat, I'm going to give you my stat about elections and about leadership. Next year, there'll be more than 70 elections. 70 elections in countries that are home to 4.2 billion people. That's more than half the population. What was the stat?
8 billion.
I think one in every 3 people on the planet will vote.
Right.
For someone.
Let's cut to Vimal. As we like Vimal, like we said, because he shoots from the hip. If Donald Trump wins the election, is that a black swan?
No.
And what does he do with his second presidency? Answer me that question.
I should ask you that question, right?
I'm the moderator. No one cares about me.
I think
they want to hear your view.
I think it doesn't matter. Even if Donald,
Really?
I tell you what, Donald Trump coming in probably is a very big plus sign, because today there is a lack of credible leadership in USA. Okay.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's my view. I think the key issue around black swans is not that black swans, you got to get prepared for them. I think it's the credible leadership we're looking for is responsiveness to anything that happens. And our fast response, adequate response, and how we handle it. Whether it's in companies, whether it's in private life, whether it's in governments, wherever, even if it's a disaster, right? The point is we still sit in NATO. NATO means no action, talk only, right? We talk a lot. I'm not talking about a normal NATO. But what people do is, we've got this policy, and the politicians, excuse the politicians, they actually put it out and say, that's our policy. But there's no action behind it.
Is this the general fault with multipolar organizations?
No, this is the problem that we talk about leadership. When you say leadership, it's not just a leader who's elected. I think it's every one of us. We're all leaders. I mean, not us only, but everybody in life is a leader. There's a leader inside them. But the responsiveness is what we're worried about. If you don't respond, whether it's in a company, whether you go to a crisis, global financial crisis, pandemic, our responsiveness was very poor. And I think decision-making abilities were skewed. Number two, people were not listening. And probably, like you said, right, COVID-19 was predicted 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
It wasn't a black swan. However, the next black swan, we don't know. The point is, can we be prepared for anything that comes in and be, agile, be versatile, and say, fine, we can tackle it. What if tomorrow Google is obsolete? Sorry. I'm not saying. What if it's obsolete, right?
Can you answer that?
What if the US currency is no more a base currency for a lot of people? What if Visa, the Visa cards, I think the Visa's represented here, if Visa card becomes obsolete because, well, let's say UPI's taken over the world.
Thank God we've got Bitcoin, yeah?
So what if Bitcoin's gone and then all our data is now available to everyone on ChatGPT?
Data is gone.
What happens then?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying these sort of events are likely to happen, and therefore the question is, are we prepared for them? Anything you put on online or wherever, it's available to the world. I'm sure Google can, I know you officially won't confirm it, but they've got it all, right? So they can sell that information to anybody.
I have to give Bhaskar a chance to respond to some of those comments.
No, I think, let me reframe it. For example, again, I'll come back to the fact that this is a really the most opportune time. Are we meeting the moment? That's the question I would ask to all of us, all businesses, including Google. So, if you look at it, the AI could be a game changer for any business. Historical advantages would not stay anymore. For example, there are 1,000+ companies who are AI startups today, and $47 billion have been invested in them like this year, right? So, and unlike in the past where the rest of the world was catching up to US, be it mobile revolution or be it internet, AI can actually start from a garage in Bangalore, right? Who could potentially disrupt any big business, in any part of the world of sorts. So I think it's also a biggest level playing field. Opportunity is available for anyone who wants to solve real problems and in a most meaningful way with radical solutions powered by tech. So I think it's an opportunity, and which is what makes it even more exciting. I would rather not be looking at how do we tame some of these problem statements and how do we mitigate this risk, but I would say how do we seize this opportunity, right? Powered by technology is the way I would look at it.
Mohandas wants to go first, then back to you, Vimal.
Look, we are in the age of digital monopolies.
Yeah.
And that to me is the biggest danger because everything comes into one or two companies. I mean, Google has got 93% global share of search. iOS and Android have got 98%, two companies, right? And similarly, global digital advertising is about two companies. Microsoft has got all enterprises. What happens if Google goes down? Somebody attacks Google, is something, it goes down. Everything is there. So, the diversification for risk mitigation in the digital world is not there. And we have digital monopolies with enormous amount of power who can use the data to control your mind. And our political leaders are unaware of the impact because this data is everywhere. For example, your data, my data is the United States, and that NSA of the United States has access to it. They know it. They know what we eat, what we do, where we are going to travel, what we do. And just imagine, please understand, if we are all shut out of the global digital system, we don't exist. We will not exist. So everything is getting concentrated. To me, that is the big risk. That's why I say the digital world and the digital revolution has created global digital monopolies. They are a big, big risk because if they come down, something happens to them, we don't exist. How can we connect? Airlines will stop.
We've changed the name of this panel to Attacking Tech Companies.
No, we are not attacking.
Forget Black Swan.
No.
It's about a
We've
black
just-
swan. It's a
forget
black
the
swan
black
event.
swans. It's
Mon-
let's attack Google. No, I'm joking.
No, Mon, before you go to Vimal,
Please
I
do,
ask Mon
please,
a
Haresh,
question.
come in.
What's the backup plan?
What is that?
What's the backup plan?
Yep. If it
There's
goes
no
down-
backup plan.
No backup
Ask
plan.
him. There's no backup plan. I mean, look, that's why I said,
Before we do ask him, Vimal, you wanted to say something, and then we give him the right to answer. We're a decent panel.
I think the problem with this is not what is suggested that this could go open. I think the problem is that everybody, if it's AI is a big disruptor, no doubt about it. But every company's got to get on top of it and surf the tsunami rather than drown and say, oh, I don't know what to do, I'm going to avoid it. Most people are resisting it, and I think that's important to say, fine, get onto it and start using it. Because it's, again, another issue, right? Tomorrow, a lot of production could be done by robots.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't have humans working.
I want to get Faizal in because I need to hear from him because this is a man, a brilliant entrepreneur, a social serial entrepreneur who looked at COVID, who suffered as we all did from COVID, and decided I'm going to do something. What did you learn from COVID, Faizal, and what are you building to help others for the next pandemic?
So what I've learned out of my life experience, I'm 61 now, as I said, there's a total imbalance in this world, correct? We are totally dominated by the US tech, the money, everything is dictated by them. The wars and the missiles all happen because of one country's dominance. I think it's time to move away, and I think it's catching up now, and that could be the next Black Swan event, could be, we don't know yet. But what I've done personally is something which we cannot control things, don't be going for that. You control yourself. So I studied, 2 years of living at home. Modern science could not save any one of us. I went and learned Ayurveda. And I went to Kerala, my hometown, and I met a 19-year-old man called P.K. Warrior. And I asked certain questions because it was 99. And I said, how many events like this you have seen? And you have survived so long, correct? He said, yes, human beings are not ready for all these events now, health-wise, correct? Our immune system is compromised, and that is because of so much of chemicals, every one of us are taking. And also it has been marketed heavily. So I got very fascinated, spending half a day with him along with my wife. And I also run a hospital, which is 20 minutes away from Kerala and Calicut. Hey, I said it's time for us to integrate something together. How do we bring both the science? Ayurveda, for example, is the oldest science of medicine from India to the world. But everybody said, it is not evidence-based, it's not scientific. And I asked these questions to Mr. Warrior, is it true? He said, it's not true, it is scientific, but it is a service for us. We didn't do this for money. We wanted to serve the humanity. So there was no need for us to go into all the research like modern science were doing it because it's not for sale. Correct? So that really opened my eyes and ears. I said, look at this, how wise this man was talking. And that's what got me interested. So I'm building Tula. Tula is a balance, is in Sanskrit. It's a $100 million facility which is opening in June, integrating all forms of traditional and modern medicines together. And it's fully sustainable. It's a net zero environment. I produce my own food. First thing I developed was the water technology. I worked with Tolaram Engineering College and developed the aquifer technology, the whole land.
What are some of the exciting technologies?
Yes. This is, Kerala gets a lot of rainfall, but most of the water drains back into the sea. And I said, how do we retain this water and pump it back into the earth, correct? So my water table level was 65 meters, today it's 30 meters. So 35 meters water table has come up in 3 years. Not only my property, the entire neighboring wells have been risen now, correct? So this time we had less rain in Kerala. So this time I went to Tula, a lot of my villagers came to see me, to thank me. I said, what did I do? He said, no, we didn't have any drought this year, because the work what you have done is really percolated to all our wells, correct? So this is what I'm doing to prepare myself and the family and my friends for the next COVID, because I said, what we need is good food, we need to have good water, you can live a healthy life and don't take chemicals, So I'm moved into an integrative medicine. And this I wanted to expand to the world. The next one will be coming in Dubai soon. So thank you.
Fantastic. Big round of applause for that. Right, listen, I want to get you involved because I know you love your black swans. Stand up, one of you. Ask the ambassador a question. Come on, stand up, put your hand up. The microphones are there. Let's get the floor involved. Come on, I want you to be involved. We want some audience. Hello, sir. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. Speak loud and clearly for ambassador. And let's get a question to ambassador.
So good afternoon, Ambassador, Your Excellency. I am African, I am South African. So there's a bit of a bias when I ask. For me, Black Swan is, you know, when I listen to everybody talk about tech and everything else, I go back to most basic. For me, it's the rise of the have-nots against the haves. And I think when we talk about Black Swan events, the more the rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting certainly poorer. And I think and this to me is a massive challenge. If you could integrate all of what you talked about, using AI to make the cost of availability of basic food essentials, and I think whether it's healthcare, whether it's basic food, I think there's something missing that maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but people talk about artificial intelligence and how to bring efficiency and how to improve the profit bottom line rather than how to give access. So this is my take on what I think the next Black Swan will be.
Yeah, I mean, Ambassador, please just elaborate on, essentially it's social inequalities.
And I think it wasn't a question, it was actually a comment that was made by my African compatriot. I agree with everything that he said. I think it all boils back to the same thing that we said. And it's not about leadership at the individual level, because actually nothing has been entrusted to you at the individual level. You know, nothing is expected of you to lead a revolution, to lead, you know, transformation in one's country. I'm talking about political leaders, actually, who have been elected and who came to the population with a mandate, an agenda, and we like the agenda and we vote for you. And you do not implement any of the agenda. And actually, for me, the tragedy has always been that a lot of work goes into preparing manifestos for our leaders, and yet those manifestos go to waste immediately after the election of the leaders. And what my South African you know, friend is talking about is true, that inequalities are much more in our countries today than they were 20 years ago, than they were 25 years ago, that they were 15 years ago. And there is a reason for that. I think that even the quality of leadership in some ways has gone down. We have stopped reading the signs, you know, of the times in our own countries, to see what really would work, what would drive our economies, you know, forward. Our private sectors do a lot of good, but they need the policy frameworks. They need the laws that support them. They need the environments created. They don't need a tax burden that will kill the goose that lays the golden egg. You know, so there are a lot of issues that go into creating the imbalances, the inequalities that we're seeing in our countries, you know, today. And I think everything that has been said is actually supportive of driving an agenda on the continent that would probably improve the situation that we are in now. AI, and it's true, I don't think anyone should be afraid of it. We should embrace it, see what actually it can do for us in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long run. What we're doing about health. In Kenya, for instance, we have the national, the Natural Products Initiative, which we started a few years ago. And what it said was that we should just go back to the basics, that our grandparents relied on herbal, you know, medicine, and that now the rest of the world actually sees the value in that. And since we have the source of the herbs that they were using, that we should actually go back to that and see how we can develop that for use by populations. And again, it's a pandemic. The pandemic created a very clear vision for many of us on the continent, but also globally. And so we're trying to do everything we can, and I really like the whole concept of creating, you know, new, you know, health facilities, new residential, you know, settlements, to make sure that we avoid anything that would compromise the health of ourselves and the people around us. So if we can use all these wonderful ideas and the technology that exists, everything that is coming to the fore right now, because of the challenges that we faced in the recent past. In fact, those challenges are still with us. We don't know when the next one is coming. So if we can use all that, then it would be, I think, much easier to deal with some of the challenges that we are facing at that level where inequalities, continue. Now, what will happen when machine technology, takes over the economies of our countries? I don't know. Will those inequalities subside, or will they actually increase? So that's a question I think that we also need to think about. But increasing our resilience and ensuring that the impact of any black swan is limited to a bare basic minimum, I think is something that should engage all of us.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let's get a question for Haresh. We want to hear more from Haresh. Come on, be brave, be bold. Let's hear about your black swan. Stand up. Yes, lady there. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. Question for Haresh.
Hi, my name is Sheena, and I'm also from Kenya, so fellow African.
Wonderful.
My question actually...
You should be answering it.
Sorry, so...
You won't ask me.
So my question is, everyone touched about AI and climate change, and a lot of the things that you've said. Now, AI takes a lot of energy. Kenya, again, my country, and this is a stat that's known globally, 93% of our energy is renewable. So if you're really talking about climate change, making a difference, why can't you bring your data centers and everything to Africa, to Kenya, use your renewable energy, create jobs for us as African, the youth, and the older people? You talked about the youth, the aging population. Kenya, Africa, we're young, we're green. But everybody talks about climate and climate funding and climate this, but take the dirty industries from the West and bring them to Africa using our renewable energy, but nobody wants to do that. So, I mean, I think that's my ask. If you really care about climate change, which is the green swan, AI, data, African data is not in the system, Indian data is not, it's all West driven. Why can't we do practical things like that, even though they're hard?
Great question. But when you talk about climate change, in the global warming specter of it, Africa only contributes 4% to the world problem.
Nothing will happen.
The balance, 96%, is all the industrial countries doing it. So we don't have a climate issue in Africa, right? If you want to bring data centers into Africa, one of the things that you need to have for data centers is a cooling system, because that's why a lot of them go to the cooler countries, because that's what they are required. The third thing we need to do in Africa is we need to fix our power, right? We lack power. I mean, I would say 75% of the population when they wake up in the morning and switch on the light, there's no power. So can you imagine how they live? So unless certain things are fixed in Africa, and to your point about green capital coming in my opinion, the move has already been made. A lot of people have shown keen interest to come and invest in green energy because we have the climate. We have the God-given resources to do this, right? But it's now the capital that has to come in. The challenge of bringing capital to Africa is always the perception. Is it a safe country to do business? Is it a safe continent to do business? But moves are being made, and these moves can only be made when we work in collaboration with organizations like the World Bank, the IFCs, the Afri-Exim Bank, the African Development Bank, but it has to be driven by private entrepreneurship. I really don't have any confidence in the government doing this. Right? As an entrepreneur who's lived there for 35 years, this has to be privately driven. Without private initiative, we can't do any green change or any change in Africa.
I want final words from Bhaskar. I'm feeling bad, guys, because it did become a little bit of a let's attack the big tech companies. So you have 2 sentences to address this point, Bhaskar. Tech is in the hands of too few, which, as we say, could end up in tears, could end up being a black swan. Ease our nerves, the nerves of some of the points that have been addressed by our panelists.
Yeah, I think firstly, tech can be a very powerful force for social good, right? I think I just want very importantly to acknowledge that, even to the question that the gentleman has asked on how do we really take care of financial inclusion, right, for haves and have-nots. I do not have knowledge of Africa or Middle East, but in India, and Vijay Shekhar Sharma is here, and what he pioneered, right? Today in India, somebody with no education but with a smartphone can open a bank account in 7 clicks from a smartphone. 7 clicks and a bank account can actually be opened. And then within 3 minutes from the time you open, you can actually transact on the internet, right? And 300 million people have access to, now definitely payments, and then now financial, even loans, and where data is actually powering many people to kind of really join what was very available only for a few millions of Indians and all that. So I think, and secondly, even we talked about climate change, we look at what AI is actually powering governments to help with flood forecasting in a major way. If you look at it, more than 80 countries, 460 million people get flood alerts a week in advance. So all in all, whether it is climate, whether it is all of it, I think tech can actually be a massive enabler for change. As I said, we can look at it as how do we mitigate this risk, and I'm sure, as I said, like Google is still a 25-year-old company, and as I said, there are AI native could come in from any country. It's a level playing opportunity here. It's very important for us to look at, not just the black mirror, but there is a white mirror, and particularly more important for emerging economies where tech could be the biggest leveler.
I wanted to end it on a peaceful note, but Mohandas he's shaking his head. I mean, do I end it or shall I let him speak? Put your hand up if you want Mohandas to speak.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
He's got to speak, doesn't he? Final words.
We have something called digital public goods in India, where the payment system is a public utility. Now, these are not digital monopolies owned by big companies. Google has got 42% market share. Vijay has got some market share, etc. But we have created a platform which are owned by public authorities, which is the model for the world for Africa.
I agree.
If you have the model owned by one or two global companies, something happens to them, that's a big event.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, he agrees to that. But India is a different model. I don't think any global company to take the benefit and say, hey, it worked in India, that's how it's going to work, because it doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Please understand.
Yeah.
India created a very unique model.
But can we export that model?
Of course, the countries have to adopt. I mean, it's the best model for the emerging markets for everybody.
Yeah.
But they don't want to do it because, you see, these people control the world. I mean, look, we got to be honest and real.
Yeah.
93% market share in search. What, Vijay? That's the monopoly, digital monopoly. They can shut you out. And who's going to debate with anybody? Twitter could shut you out. Twitter shut you out in the last election, right? And who could debate with them? Nobody. See, please understand, global digital monopolies are the biggest thing we've seen in the world in the last 100 years after the East India Company. It is they're all great companies. They want to change the world, do no evil. That is fantastic. And in doing no evil, they earn $60, $70 billion a year, which is fantastic. They'll earn $100 billion in 2 years, which is fantastic for them. And we remain the poor guys who keep paying for it, and we are another power. It's a real threat. Please understand this.
My mother always said it's best to leave the party.
Totally agree with you. I think one thing that would affect it is geopolitics.
Yeah,
geopolitics going in and saying, okay, you're an American company, stop all over the world.
We're doomed.
Don't do it for the world, and then we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
My mother always said it's best to leave the party when it's going strong. Don't leave it when you're drunk at 5 in the morning. Well, this party is going strong. We need to leave it. Give them a massive round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mother.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. Really good chat. Thank you all. That was brilliant. Let's get Edie to the stage.